Hello and welcome to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter for On SI, covering the Jacksonville Jaguars every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move through another offseason together. As always, you can find us anywhere on social media at Jaguars on SI, whether on Facebook or Twitter, and you can find the best and most comprehensive Jaguars content anywhere at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley, and we are now just a few more days away from the 2025 NFL Draft. So we are going to continue, talk about the draft coming up in these next few days. We'll give you guys our live boots on the ground coverage from the Miller Electric Center on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. For my money, the best time of the year. It's the most exciting time. It's a time really built on hope, drama, all the, things that really entertain us when it comes to football, other than the actual beautiful sport that takes place on the field. Today, when it comes to the draft, I want to talk about, are there any prospects the Jaguars should consider trading back into the first four? Now, anybody who has listened to me, over the last couple of years knows my stance on trading up and trading down. It's kind of a cliche thing to say now, and, that it's really been a beat horse, but trading down is always the better bet between the two. Yes, you can sometimes, get a franchise-changing level prospect when you trade up, especially in the first round, early in the first round. But it's also hard for those players alone to kind of recoup that value. I think, one of the few trades I'd say that has actually, worked out in this team's favor. The trade up for Will Anderson, and it didn't even work out in theory. It just kind of ended up working out. They got Will Anderson, great player, and, the team that they traded with hasn't really produced results with the draft picks that they got. But normally, it's easy math. If you're taking a bet on 3 or 4 or 5 different players to work out, as opposed to betting on one singular player to work out, it makes sense. So that's my stance on trading back and trading up. I mean, the Jaguars have really taken advantage of trading back. The Brian Thomas Jr. trade last year, that's a reason they have an extra 3rd and 4th pick this year to really fortify the roster. So naturally, in most cases, I'm thinking that trading up isn't a great idea. Now, when you do it on day 3, it can be a little different. You can still kind of get killed on value, but, it's less harmful. Obviously, if you're losing a trade on day 3 as opposed to losing on day 1, but that's also a time where you can really, kind of get your targets, some guys who kind of niche fits, that kind of stuff. So my stance is that trading back is always better than trading up. The last time the Jaguars had a big trade up in the 2000, not 2000, but in the NFL draft in the last couple of years, and this isn't the last time they traded up. The last big one they had was for Devin Lloyd in 2022. They traded back into the first round. At the time, I distinctly remember that so many people were upset at the coverage, from Pro Football Focus, ESPN's analytics, about just the idea of the Jaguars making that trade. So the Jaguars traded from number 33 with Tampa Bay to go up 6 boxes, 27, and they gave up the 106th pick and 180. So go back to the 2022 NFL draft, and who went 106, who went 180. That is, one of these times where now, Cade Otton goes 106. They also got, Logan Hall in that draft, with the pick. They traded the pick, the 180 to Buffalo, and ended up getting more and more players. It's just a recent example of why trading up into the first round is sometimes, a dangerous proposition to be in, frankly. But in terms of what are the pros to trading up in the first round, I think it's pretty obvious. one of the best things about, the draft process over the last decade or so is the fifth-year option. For teams, it just gives them the ultimate chance to, really keep players, at a cost control level, give them more flexibility to ensure that they have the time to work out, as the picks. And there's a reason that a lot of teams trade up into the back end of the first round. That's because, they want to get that fifth-year option for the player. It's, just off the rip better than the standard, 1-year rookie contract that a player is getting. So in terms of the advantages of it, if you're really all in on a player and moving into the first round for him, as opposed to maybe picking him at 33rd, you have that entire fifth-year option that you can now work with, as opposed to, in different case where, you have to make it work in the first 4 years. So I think ultimately, there are a few prospects who make sense for the Jaguars, obviously who might be available on day 2. So when looking at the players who make sense, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, I'm going to look at Dane Brugler's players ranked from 20 and 30. You don't want to move back into the first round and what that might cost for players I think who are just barely maybe first round players. Like, here's who he has from 30 to 40. Jahdae Barron, I probably wouldn't trade up for him. Walter Nolan, probably not. Gray Zabel, probably not. Mason Taylor, no. Shadur Sanders, obviously no. Maxwell Hairston, no. James Pierce, no. Ariante Ursay, no. Carson Schlesinger, no. Trey Amos, no. Tyleik Williams, no. The only one there who you're maybe trading up for is maybe Walter Nolan. I don't even think Gray Zabel. But when you look at it from 20 to 30, I think there are a lot more interesting questions. Let's just start off with Josh Simmons from Ohio State. If it gets to like pick 25, pick 26, and Josh Simmons is still there, and the Jaguars obviously didn't take an offensive lineman at the 5th pick, that might be a tough pick, honestly, to turn down. I think he's the second best left tackle in this draft after Will Campbell. I think he's a natural left tackle, and if it wasn't for the injury, etc., he would just be an automatic top 10 pick. The next two players, Michael Williams and Donovan Ezeuruaku, that's tough. I like Michael Williams. I like the style that he plays with. He really is similar in some ways, not exactly, but in some ways to Trayvon Walker as a prospect. Would certainly fill that edge 3 role. You could probably talk me into it if you're not giving up too much. Ezeuruaku, probably not. Josh Connolly of Oregon, I'm a big fan of his as well, but I'd say he's probably a tier below Simmons, and that's, the tier where I think you're probably better waiting off seeing who might be there at 36. Tyler Booker, no, I wouldn't. This might look dumb if he lands with the right team, which is why a lot of times draft coverage can look like this. But I'm not sure Booker is a guy I would have a first round grade on if, you're just grading him across the board, fit for all teams. I think for gap, power-based blocking schemes, absolutely first round level player. For teams who want a little bit more movement ability out of their offensive linemen, I don't think so. I don't think a player with his level of athleticism and its tested athleticism is a guy that you move the mountains to draft. I think the Jaguars could find, other guys. Kenneth Grant, if they don't take a defensive tackle earlier on, but probably not. And I really like Kenneth Grant, but I don't think I'm trading up for a nose tackle with pass rush potential. Kelvin Banks, he'd be an interesting one. He could play inside, obviously. He could potentially play outside. That's an interesting one to consider because I do think he should be a first-round talent. Luther Burden, I probably wouldn't trade up for. Egbuka, you have to think about it, right? I think he's a first-round receiver. It's just receivers of position start becoming a lot like running back where, you can kind of filter these guys out and find some guys who can have similar production later on. And then the last one, Omarion Hampton. No, I'm not. I don't think they should trade up for a running back. So there are a few guys I think, you probably would have to consider trading up for. I think Michael Williams is one. I think Joshua Simmons, is one, obviously. I think Egbuka is one that you think about. I think Kelvin Banks is one that you would think about. So I do think that they would have their options, but I'm not sure there's exactly a bounty full of them, if that makes sense. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Be back next time.